Let us begin by reading the word problem out loud. John's philosophy final had a combination of multiple choice and true and false questions. Each multiple choice question answered correctly is worth 3 points, and each true-false question answered correctly is worth 1 point. John answered 22 questions correctly and earned a total of 50 points. How many multiple choice and true-false questions did John answer correctly? Let us begin our strategy for problem solving by analyzing the problem. Keep in mind that the first thing you want to do when analyzing any problem is you want to identify what's being asked of you to find. In this case, we're asked how many multiple choice and true-false questions did John answer correctly. So the key thing here is the word and. So ideally there's two things we want to find. We want to find the number of multiple choice questions and the number of true-false questions answered correctly. So now that we know what our unknown variables are going to represent, let's go ahead and jump to step 2 and assign the variables. Keep in mind that we want to assign the variables in such a way that ideally it's a question reworded in the form of a statement, so we'll go ahead and assign the following variables to represent the following things. So we'll go ahead and let x equal the number of multiple choice questions answered correctly, and y equal the number of true-false questions answered correctly. So now that we have assigned a variable, let us go back to analyzing the problem. So just by the first line, we know that John took a philosophy final, and it had a combination of multiple choice and true-false questions. And we also know that each multiple choice question answered correctly is worth 3 points, and each true-false question answered correctly is worth 1 point. So those are key things. Each multiple choice question answered correctly is 3 points, and each true-false question answered correctly is 1 point. So let's go ahead and I'm going to underline that as well. So the keyword being each multiple choice question is worth 3 points, and each true-false question is worth 1 point. And then we also know that he answered a total of 22 questions correctly and earned a total of 50 points. So here we go. The two key things here are that 22 is all about questions, and total of 50 points, so that's about points. So ideally we're going to have two equations, and one question is going to be about questions, and the other equation is going to be about points. And again, that's because the two units that are given are questions and points. Another thing to keep in mind is also the following. Since we have two unknown variables, we're going to need a total of two equations in order to be able to solve it. So I'm going to go ahead and list a reminder up at the top. So we're going to have the following. The number of equations is to equal the number of unknown variables. Perfect. So let's go ahead and begin creating our first equation. The first equation is going to be about questions, and in blue we know that John answered 22 questions correctly. So that means that the number of multiple choice questions plus the number of true-false questions that he answered correctly has to equal 22. So it's going to go ahead and give us our first equation. It's going to be x plus y is equal to 22. So that's going to be our first equation. And our second equation, similar idea, but now it's going to be about points. So we're going to combine the red with the blue. So we know that each multiple choice question answered correctly is 3 points, and each true-false question answered correctly is 1 point. So we're going to multiply the number of questions by their point value. So what I mean by that is, for example, the multiple choice questions are worth 3 points, so we're going to have 3 multiplied by x. And that's going to be the number of points that we get from the multiple choice questions answered correctly. And we're going to add to that the point value of the true-false questions, which is 1, multiplied by the number of true-false questions answered correctly, which is y. and that's going to be equal to the total points that he earned, which is 50. So those are going to be our two equations. So now that we have both of our equations, let's go ahead and solve them. I'm going to start off by bringing them down. So I'll have x plus y is equal to 22. And the second equation is 3x plus y is equal to 50. So now we want to pick one equation and we want to solve for one of the variables, and we're going to eventually substitute that into the other equation. So the first equation has coefficients of 1 for both the x and y, so I'm going to work with this one. I'm going to choose to solve for y. So what I'm going to do, if I want to get the y completely by itself, I want to undo that addition of x. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to subtract x from both sides. So let me go ahead and do that. So notice that when we subtract x from both sides, on the left-hand side, the positive x and the negative x simplify out, leaving us simply with y. And on the right-hand side, we're left with 22 minus x. So now we have the y variable completely by itself, and we know that it's equal to 22 minus x. So we're going to go ahead and substitute that in to the second equation. So we're going to have a 3x plus, and now for y, we're going to substitute 22 minus x, and that's still equal to 50. So there we go. So now let's go ahead and combine like terms. We're going to have a 3x minus an x, so that's going to leave us with a 2x, and then we still have plus 22, and that's equal to 50. And again, we're going to want to get the x variable completely by itself. So what we're going to do first is we're going to undo this addition of 22. The only way to undo it is by subtracting 22 from both sides. So let me go ahead and do so. So there we go. And then once we subtract 22, on the left-hand side of the equation, the positive 22 and the negative 22 simplify out, leaving us with 2x is equal to, and then 50 minus 22 is going to give us a 28. So now again, we want to get the x variable by itself. The last thing to do is to divide by 2, since we are currently multiplying by 2. So we want to undo using the opposite operation. So on the left, the 2 divided by 2 simplify to give us a 1x, or simply x, and we're left with 14 on the right hand side. So that's going to be our value for x. And now that we know the value for x, we're going to go ahead and substitute that into the first equation to find the value of y. So we're going to have y is equal to 22 minus 14. So we're left with y is equal to 8. So now we know both the values of x and y, so let us see our conclusion clearly. So we'll go ahead and state the following. John answered 14 multiple choice and 8 true-false questions correctly. So now let us go ahead and check the result. First things first, we're going to go ahead and copy down the original equations. So we'll have the following. So the original equation from step 3 are x plus y is equal to 22 and 3x plus y is equal to 50. Now we're going to go ahead and substitute their corresponding values that we found. That's going to leave us with 14 plus 8 is equal to 22, and 3 times 14 plus 8 is equal to 50. Simplifying the first equation, we end up with 22 is equal to 22. So that equation is correct. And then simplifying the second equation, we end up with 42 plus 8 is hopefully equal to 50. And 42 plus 8 is indeed equal to 50. So we end up with 50 is equal to 50, which is a true statement. So that verifies that both our equations are correct.